G'day, Michael from ironbarkgamesstudio, and welcome to the fourth part in this series, which will take you through the process of retopologizing the head sculpt. So retopology is the method of creating a new, cleaner mesh with the same form as the original model, typically used to reduce the poly count and create better edge flow. There are automated tools to do this, but in our case we need to be quite specific in how we want that edge flow to flow around the face of our model. So jumping into Blender from last time, we've got our head sculpt and we've also got our eyes. I've named these in the scene collection up here just to keep them nice and neat. And the first thing we'll be looking at is how to create the setup for retopologizing a mesh. So I'm going to select the head here. The head is the only thing we actually need to retopologize. That's the thing which has the huge poly count there. So if I press / to isolate it, we can see that it's got 1.8 million tries in there. If you want to get the statistics up there, just this little drop down and turn on the statistics. Once I'm in here, I can go Shift A and add a plane. And I'm going to go into edit mode, scale it down, bring it up, and then rotate it on the X by 90 degrees. And I'm just going to position this in front of the forehead here. I want to mirror this, so I'm going to go Control R, put an edge loop down the center, and delete one side. Go into my modifier properties and add a mirror modifier, and then turn on clipping. I might also just reduce the merge distance down to 0.0001. Now the next thing we want to be able to do is snap the vertices of the low poly mesh onto the head sculpt. So I'm going to come up to the snapping here, I'm going to turn on this little magnet tool, and instead of increment, I'm going to set it to face project, and then turn on project individual elements. So now if I grab a vertex with G, it's going to snap to the head mesh there. So this is the crux of retopology. The problem is though, is that there's a fair bit of clipping and we can't really see what will be our low poly mesh. So a couple things we're going to turn on. If we go to the object properties of our plane, if we open up the viewport display, we can click on in front. So that's going to render our low poly mesh on top of the sculpt. I'm going to go to the materials tab here and I'm going to create a new material. And I'll call this something like Retopo. Changing the base color here won't affect it in the viewport display. We've got to scroll down, come into the viewport display, and change the color in here. I'm going to go for like a blue color, seems fairly typical of a retopology color. And then the final thing I'm going to do is come up here to the shading tab and turn on back face coloring. So if I look around to the back here, we can see the faces on both sides are being displayed, which will be quite distracting when we start adding in lots of topology. So we've got to come down here, turn on back face culling, and that's going to not show us the back faces there. So the idea from here is to add in our key loops to the character. We don't want the edge flow to be too dense to start off with. We can always add in additional cuts later. So we want to go really simple to start off with. A few tools that we can use to retopologize the mesh. So we can just come in here and just start grabbing vertices and using G to grab, and that's just going to snap around to the sculpt there. If we select multiple vertices, or if we go into edge mode and just select an edge, hit E to extrude, that'll extrude out the edges, and we could go along like this. Another tool which you can use is the poly build tool, so that is this one here. So we can turn that on. And this may be a bit quicker, especially when sort of starting off. So if you left click and drag on an edge, that's going to pull out the edge like that, so you don't have to hit E to extrude. You can grab the vertices like that and just sort of move them around without having to press G. If you hold Shift and hover over the face and just left click, that's going to delete it, so you don't have to press X to delete things. And if we just, let's bring this out as an example. If you hold down Control and pull out, that's going to extrude a face between two opposite edges there. So again, holding down Control whilst hovering over a vertex, and just left click and drag, that's going to pull out a new face like that. So you can either use the poly build tool to create your retopology, or if you just hit W to go back to your regular tool, you can just select the vertices, hit E, and just regularly extrude and grab out the faces there. Either or is going to work perfectly fine. Basically, it's up to you, whatever you're going to find the fastest to create this. So now I've got to start extruding out my edge loops. So I'm going to start with an edge loop that sort of goes around both eyes to start off with. So I'm just going to start grabbing these vertices. And I'm going to go E to extrude. I'm just going to extrude out around. And again, we're going fairly light on the number of polys we're adding in. We can always add in more later. Make sure they snap in the center there. And I'm just going to grab a face here and just go Shift D to duplicate it. And I'm going to add one around the eye now. And I'll complete that loop there. And I want to be a little bit strategic about how many vertices I have on the top and bottom. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 up the top. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 down the bottom. So that when I create faces in between, I have the exact number and it's going to be a lot easier to line things up. Same thing when I've been going around the outside here. I've been trying to line up these edges together so that when I do actually get around to creating faces in between them, it's going to be a lot easier down the line. So I'm going to come in here and start doing the nose. I'm just going to Shift D to duplicate that one, and we'll sort of go around the front, the tip of the nose here. Just extrude out the loops. And again, I just kind of want to make sure that I have an even number of vertices on the top and the bottom. We'll add in little loops for the nostrils as well. Just duplicate this face and shrink it down. Let's come down here and do the mouth, duplicate all of those down there, and we'll try and go around the outside of the lips. And we want one that goes around the nose and then up around the chin. So this edge flow is going to be fairly typical of most humanoid characters' faces. Alright, we want another loop that goes all around the face now and underneath the jaw. Let's start up the top. Let's just copy all of these ones. And again, I'm just sort of extruding it to line up the edges on one side to the other. Okay, and the other major feature of our face here is the crest, so we may as well put a loop going all around the top of the crest and looping down around the back. So obviously you wouldn't do this for most characters. This is just a particular instance where this character has a feature that we should put a loop around. So these are the major edge loops created around the face. If we hold down Ctrl R, we can see that we have loop cuts running all the way through them. And this is really good edge flow for our character. It particularly helps if we want to animate facial features. It helps with the stretching of geometry. Now the idea here is we need to fill in all of the empty areas in between our edge loops. So for the most part, we want to be keeping our geometry as quads, as n-gons and tris are going to break up the edge flow. We also want to avoid six-sided poles. These are vertices with 6 or more connecting edges and can create poor deformation if we want to do things like animate the face. So coming down to the nose to start off with, we don't need geometry that's particularly dense around here. So I'm going to merge a lot of these vertices together, and I'm going to do that by turning on the Auto Merge Vertices tool. So if I grab one vertex there, hit G, I move it over the top of another one, and then left click, that's going to merge the two together. So I'm just going to merge these vertices here. And we might just want to readjust how big each of the faces are. We want a fairly sort of equal density in terms of the size of the faces here. And let's merge up these vertices along the nose there. And again, we just want to adjust the size of these like so. Then we're going to have areas like around the eye where we probably want an additional loop of faces around there, particularly because we have sort of like this bridge around the eyelid there. So instead of dragging and merging them together, I'm just going to go into edge selection, select two opposite edges, hit F for face. If we've got a long loop going around here, we can just select one edge, hold down Control, and then left click to select the shortest path between them. So let's all go all the way up to there. Shift select this one here, hold down Control, and then select an edge around here, and just select the shortest path. Assuming we have an equal number of edges on each side, we can just right click, and then we can go Bridge Edge Loops. That's going to create faces in between. We don't have to manually create a face in between each one of those. And then we might want to just even up the vertices a little bit as well, just to even up the density of vertices in this area. From here, we want to just tackle the easy areas to fill up with faces. So I can see an easy area up the top. So I'm just going to select all these edges here, right click, and then bridge. And create a face in there as well. And maybe one there as well. Once we start to get to these larger areas, we can't really bridge faces along here without losing too much of the detail beneath it. So we're going to leave these ones for later. Same with the faces in these holes here, which become a little bit more complicated. So we can bridge faces across like that, and then we can always add additional edge loops later on. I'm just going to leave it fairly low poly for now. I did forget one extra edge loop, and that is around the base of the neck, so I'll also add that in here. So let's select a face, Shift D to duplicate. So we want to make sure we roughly maintain the shape of the head underneath, so we don't want to go too low poly. And let's connect up these edges as well. Okay, let's start to tackle the more complex areas, such as around the nose here. So we need to try and line up these edges with these ones in there. So let's just grab this edge loop here, hit E, and then scale it out. And looks like that's clipped onto that one, so I might just turn off the auto merge there. And I'm going to manually sort of pull out these edges, kind of roughly line them up where I think that they should go. I think this is going to be the trickiest part in here, so we did create a face in there and there. Let's see if we can line these up across. And we're going to get into a situation where we don't have enough faces to line up here. We're going to get a try in there. So instead of going from there, might delete this face and bring that one across. pull that one over there. Then these ones can go up. Create a face in there. And we'll extrude these ones across. Okay, and we have all quads in there now, so let's just try to reshape this a little bit better. Should make it a bit easier to create quads on this side now. Let's just extrude all this across to the center there. And just bring this down a little bit, just to make it a little bit less dense in that area. Let's work up here now. Create a cut in there. Create another cut in there. Looks like we might need one more cut. Again, just making sure everything's kept as quads. And we kind of want to conform the edge flow to the actual mesh behind it as well. Try to keep that shaping. Let's tackle the mouth area now. Just want to make sure that there's enough geometry so that around those sort of curved surfaces it does actually follow it and it's not too bumpy or jagged. Might even want another edge cut through there. Note that when you add an edge cut, you still do need to grab the geometry for it to snap to the mesh behind it. Let's start extruding these ones across now. Just kind of lining these up on onto the vertices on the other side. So I'm going to need 2 more cuts in there, so I have an equal number on each side. And let's just bridge this side to this side. And now we can now we know how many edges we need down here. So Control R and add 2. Let's make sure to grab them so they snap to the geometry behind. Now we can let's actually just create a face between these, create a cut in the middle. And I'm just trying to shape it around the shape of the sculpt behind it. So we have geometry in areas where we have curved surfaces. So we've got quite a few vertices down the bottom which aren't really being used for much, so we can sort of shift them all up a little bit. Okay, something like that. Let's fill in the top of the head now, and then going around the back of the head back to the neck. So let's grab these edges here, sort of in line with what we've already got, and just extrude them down. Sort of trying to keep them in line, again with the curves of the geometry, and line them up with the geometry that we've already created. And let's create faces between those. I think we might need one more cut in there, just to keep the shape. Let's extrude these. And fill in that face there. Looks like we're going to need one more cut in there. And then we can add cuts in here to sort of line them up with this side. So 1, 2, 3, 4 cuts. Control R, scroll wheel to 4. Just G to grab them so that they pop out in line with the mesh. And let's do a bridge. And then we can just readjust these so they're not quite as dense around the forehead. Give a little bit more geometry to other areas. Now we can extrude all of these back across the head. So let's grab from here, kind of down to here, and we'll keep this sort of fairly straight and in line with the cuts along the crest loop. Let's also even them up a little bit. Extrude that back, and we'll kind of curve these ones in. Let's do one more. Let's fill in these top faces to start with. And now let's do the ones down here. Extrude the same number of edges as the one above, sort of visually lining these up here. Might have to add in a few more cuts actually. Let's create faces in here. Now it's a matter of connecting the rest of them up. Create a face in there, and then I'll have a cut coming down there. So we may just have to realign these vertices here. Bridge those faces, and we're going to need one cut in here, and then we'll create quads up there. Let's create some faces between these, and we'll need 2 edge loops along the back here. Merge these at center. Okay, there we go. Alright, and we just need to fix up this area around the front of the neck there, so we're going to need a couple of edge loops in there, I reckon, just to at least get the shaping nice. Merge those at center. And we'll need one more edge loop around here, and we can just shift this one along this way. And that's actually sort of crumpled that down, so let's be a little bit more careful how we move that. Let's neaten this back area up just a touch. Don't have too much left to do. We've got the nostrils, the mouth, and then the crest. So I might just grab these, can extrude them one more time and then scale them down. And then the mouth, we might actually do a similar thing, so grab the full edge loop, just Alt left click, E to extrude, and then scale that in. Again, we want to make sure that we keep enough sort of geometry so we keep the shape of the lips. I think that's kept the shape fairly well. Obviously, you're never going to get it as smooth as the original sculpt with the million polys. And then we just need to fix up this little area in here. Let's create one more cut in here. Okay, we can just hold down Control R, just sort of run the loop cut tool just to sort of see that we're sort of retaining fairly good geometry in here. I think it's looking pretty good so far. Keep it all as quads, none of the geometry is getting broken up by any tris or n-gons. Okay. For the eye, we don't need to extrude all the way back in. Because the eyeball's going to be there, you don't really need the geometry behind the eye. Sometimes you could do this if you really wanted to, but it's not that necessary. It's probably just going to be wasting polygons anyway. So let's just scale that, extrude, and I might just do this sort of twice. Doesn't need to go too far back. Now we just got to finish off the crest there. So let's just grab this edge here and just sort of extrude that along the back all the way along the top. And then just extrude this and just sort of line them up with the existing edges. again, I want to line up the edges where there's actually sort of curves or bends where we need the geometry, because that's just going to retain the shape better. Sort of add a bit more geometry around the points here. It is a relatively small detail in there though, so you don't need to add too many edges. Okay, back to lining up the edges with the opposite sides. Let's actually add a little bit more in here, we can afford it. This is quite a fine tip, so it's going to get a little bit trickier in there. And just extrude this back along the inside. And finally, let's connect this up back to the base there. Okay, so now that we've got this line of edges all along the top, it's going to make it a fair bit easier to combine them to the existing edges. So I think I do want an extra sort of edge loop coming along the inside here just for a little bit of extra geometry. So let's just combine what we've got up in chunks. Let's do that for now. And I probably want, let's just go one more edge loop in there, G to grab. And I think that's going to be okay. So now if we create a face here, do need to merge these together. And we can get rid of this edge now. X dissolve edge. And we have a quad in here. That's going to work pretty well there. Let's bridge across these ones to start off with. Got a little bit of complexity around here which we'll have to deal with. But let's tackle the easier areas to start with. And we'll just get rid of that edge again, dissolve that. So we've got a quad that we can create there. Almost done. Just got to finish off this little bit in here. And let's create a quad here, I think. Put another edge loop up there. We can make a quad out of this. Go one more. And let's just add this extra detail to the shaping in there. We'll need to do something similar for this one here. So we created a quad at that point, like this, add another cut there, fill in that quad. Again, may as well use those extra vertices to shape that curve. Yeah, I don't think that's messed up the edge flow too bad. That still looks pretty good in there. And there we go, that is the retopology pretty much done. So I'm going to exit edit mode, go back into object mode. I can press / again to exit isolate. And we just want to clean this up a little bit so we can see it, so it's not sort of appearing in front of everything like the armor. So I'm going to come into my material first and just click on the retopology, or the retopo material, and then click on the minus next to it to get rid of it. Just back to our regular grey. Come into our object properties here, turn off in front. Now that's going to start sort of conflicting with our sculpted topology behind it, so we can just turn off the head sculpt there, and if we wanted to we could call this something like head retopo, and then we can just right click and shade it smooth. We'll probably also want to turn off the snapping and turn off the back face culling. So that is the head retopology done. With that, we have just reduced the 2 million try sculpt to about a couple of thousand tries. So if we have a look in here, we're even lower than that. We're 1,300 tries, which is nice and low poly. The main thing here is that the head retains the form of the sculpt and the definition in the key areas such as the lips and the cheeks and the nose, around the eyes and the crest. Don't worry about not seeing all of that sculpted detail though. We're going to get this back in a few tutorials time with texturing. So just make sure don't delete the head sculpt, just leave that in the background, just hidden there, because we're going to be grabbing all of this sculpted detail and baking it onto our low poly mesh. At the moment we have a high and low poly head, but the rest of the character's components are all low poly. We can create some extra high poly parts such as details on the armor or folds on the fabric. This high poly detail along with the head sculpt can be used to make life easier and get better results in the texturing stage. Thanks for watching this video. Please like and subscribe if you found it useful. You can check out our Patreon link in the description with a variety of rewards such as starting files, tutorial notes, and early access to the rest of the series. And I'll see you in the next one.